Thank you for tuning into Natty News Daily Weekly, where we cover the latest ongoings in natural bodybuilding. If you see a cool story you think we should cover, please send it our way, and maybe we'll include it in the next episode. And if you like what we're doing and would like to support us, please consider checking out one of our sponsors. Our sponsor, Core Nutritionals, for all your supplement needs. Code Natty News Daily, as well as GymPin. If you want to add weight to the machines in your gym, you're running out of room, check out GymPin. Also code Natty News Daily. Enjoy the episode.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Natty News Daily Weekly. This weekly segment is one, delayed, and two, as you can tell, it's not just me ranting. We needed my anger translator, Dan, to come in on this one. No, this is like attempt 3 slash maybe 4 to record this. We had to work through this a couple different times. And we were actually trying to record a full podcast with individuals involved with this, and it just kind of fell through. But this is something that we felt it was our obligation to cover, right? These WNBF rule changes just came out. They already released some rules which are covered within the document a couple months ago, which kind of caused a stir. So we knew this was something that the people need to hear about. The post that they put out first had, I'm actually looking at it right now, 1,500 likes, lots of comments, so was received well. There are some things we want to cover, though, just kind of as a carryover to make sure that the athletes are aware of changes that have been made. So, Dan, I'm actually going to even turn it over to you to just kind of let's dive right in. Let's talk about it. Let's talk pros and cons and how this is going to impact the athletes going forward in 2024.
Yeah, so I'll go through the rules here in a second, but I just want to recap from a high level. There are some really nice improvements in the rules that are included here. Some stuff that we've been pushing for from a while, others have been pushing for from a while, and I think athletes, in the modern era are gonna like. There's some stuff that, as you alluded to, just comes into question a little bit in terms of how that rule is going to be applied, what the intent of the rule is, and you kind of again alluded to it, but. We do intend to get Bob Bell on the podcast in short order here in the next week or two, probably, to talk directly on this and to get some clarity on this. But we did want to get this out there and cover these rules because they are important. The 2024 season is coming. I'm sure people are either starting prep or are looking at starting prep. I know I'm looking at starting prep in a few weeks, so it's relevant. So I've got the rules up here, and we can just go through it.
Yeah.
So
do we want to before we dive into the rules, do we want to cover the post which talks about the rules that are no longer present? Because I think that was the biggest thing that we've been pushing for specifically.
Yeah, we can cover that first. If you want to read those out.
I can just read right through it, right? So WNBF puts out this big post. We kind of knew this was coming just from the conversations we've been having with certain individuals. The big thing is, and I can just read right through, to give WNBF professionals the time to both recover from the process of turning pro and to build a pro-worthy physique, and to allow current pros more flexibility in their competitive careers, we've removed all requirements to compete on a regular timetable, e.g. the initial 1-year rule for new pros, which we'll discuss, and every other year rule for current pros. WNBF pros simply need to stay current with their annual membership fees, and they will remain eligible to compete as WNBF pros. For pros who don't compete for extended periods, there may be off-season testing requirements, which I think we can all agree is completely fine, right? So the stipulation they're saying is all you have to do to maintain your pro card membership is pay your dues, which a lot of people have been pushing for, right? So going back to that 1-year rule and the every other year rule, right? The 1-year rule was initially, and for historically, if you turn pro, new pro, amateur to pro, I'm rambling now. If you turn pro in 2024, you have to compete within a calendar year as a pro within the WNBF to cement that pro status, right? So say I win a show in April, I have until the following April to compete as a pro to activate that pro status. A lot of people not super big fans of that, right? Because the logistics of where do I have to travel to actually compete as a pro, because there's not that many pro shows. What if this is my 6th show to get my pro card and I'm just completely burnt out, and just put unnecessary strain on people, right? So that's the 1-year rule. Dan, you want to cover the 2-year or the every other year rule for the current pros?
Yeah, so beyond that, after you quote unquote originally supposed to cement your pro status within a year, you were required to compete every other year. Now, there were some exemptions granted in certain circumstances. I know there was maybe a little bit of controversy on some of that. I don't think we need to dig into that, but due to like people having family things come up, medical things come up, all that sort of stuff. But in general, you were supposed to compete every 2 years. So every other year, you were supposed to compete as a pro to retain that pro membership. But as James mentioned, that rule has been nixed. So I think that's a really positive step in the current environment where people are the conditioning standard is really high right now, and that comes with a cost, and there's a recovery cost in it. So gives people proper time to recover from seasons and then get proper off seasons and then compete when they want to and when they feel ready. And I think that's a positive step for a lot of people. I know personally, I tend to compete every 3 years or so. That's not out of me not wanting to compete, but the fact that I take a long time to recover and I want to make big improvements from season to season. So
yeah,
I'm a fan, and I know a lot of other people are fans of this rule.
yeah, and just when asked about this rule prior, WNBF officials had said it was a rule to incentivize. I don't know if incentivize is the best word. It was a rule to dictate that pros stay current and relevant, pretty much, right? We want to keep you competing, to keep the ranks filled, to keep you in the sport, to keep you involved, which is great in theory. But like you said, like just the standard of the sport from 10 years ago to now has just dictated these longer off seasons, but also these longer preps, which just made that timetable really not feasible for some people.
Yeah.
And just the exemptions, like you said, right? Like it just adds unnecessary subjectivity and he said, she said, and like favoritism potentially, or the belief that there is favoritism, or maybe there isn't, just because this individual gets an exemption, this individual doesn't, and because of that, they lose their pro card, and just caused a lot of fighting for a rule that wasn't really doing what it was intended to do anymore. So yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled that the rule is gone for sure.
Yep, as am I. So, yep, good on the WNBF for and Bob and Tina for taking that feedback and implementing that and listening to the people that have been, pushing for that. So I think that's a positive move.
Yeah, yeah. Now there was even questions before we even dive into the rules, which I know we have questions about. I saw a lot of posts on the official post asking, what about retrospective athletes that have lost their pro card because of this rule, right? And I don't know how that's going to be addressed. I don't know how you would address it. There are numerous people who lost their WNBF pro status simply because they didn't compete frequently enough. And now it's no longer a requirement. So how do we address that? What's the move going forward? I don't know that answer, and I don't know if they know that answer just yet, but we'll definitely keep our ears open and hope to see a solution come of that.
That's a good point out. Well, that's something I didn't even think of, but I did notice that people were commenting that. So we'll talk with Bob about that. So yeah, that'll be a good to get clarity on that. Very good point, James.
Yeah. All right. Nothing to it but to dive into the rules now, right?
Yes, sir. All right, let's get into it. So the first rule upon achieving WNBF pro status, athletes have 30 days to complete their pro card application, submit membership fees. Pretty straightforward to me. Like, you win your pro card and 30 days to register, right? And to keep that pro card. And it looks like they did actually put the intent there is to keep athletes from continuing to compete as amateurs when they've already won a pro card and then taking pro cards from other athletes. So I think that's a positive move. Any pushback on you, James? That seems all.
No, I completely agree with that one, right? Like the time period, yeah, just pay your dues, move up in the ranks. Like you've won it, you've earned it. I get it. Like even if you don't feel like you have earned it, like you have to look at it from another athlete's perspective, right? If you're someone who's just winning 4 or 5 amateur shows, that's 4 or 5 other pros that could be filling the ranks and raising the standard of competition. So I agree with that one completely.
Yeah. Once you turn pro, it's like, yeah, you should take that pro card, right? So,
Yeah.
The second rule here, this is the one that I think we have the most questions on. How this is going to be applied, what the intent of this rule is. So, this is the one we'd like to focus on when we do get Bob on the podcast here shortly. So, I'm just going to read it verbatim. So, a new pro shall first compete in a WNBF pro event prior to competing with other federations to value their WNBF professional membership opportunity. Please indicate this debut event when registering for your WNBF Pro card. So this one it does seem like it might be a little bit restrictive, like some of the stuff that we have been criticizing for a long time. A lot of people have been criticizing for a long time. We did have some chats with, I don't know if Bob mentioned something about him wanting to, and again, we'll get full clarity. So I'm speaking kind of just off the cuff now. So Bob can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. But he did mention, he would like a lot of his show promoters to make sure that they're getting athletes at their events. And then from direct experience, we've run a show. We were involved with the WNBF Ontario. The WNBF's not taking a cut out of that. So there's no financial incentive for them to do that. They genuinely want to support their promoters. So from what I've interpreted, that seems to be part of the intent of the rule. I don't know that necessarily accomplishes it by requiring somebody to make their first WNBF pro event or first show when they win their pro card, a WNBF pro event. And then we can talk, James, logistics. We talked off air about this, and I think this is something we should cover. So I don't know logistically if this is a rule that's kind of makes sense, especially for athletes. Like we register, pretty far in advance for shows. And a lot of times we have a full season laid out. I mean, we might have some play here and there, like we might register for this show if things change, but a lot of times you'll register for 3 or 4 shows in advance. So you might say win a WNBF Pro card, and then the next weekend you have another event with another organization. So it's a question of like you've already paid for your paid for the
and most of those are non-refundable.
Yeah, you've paid for that. So it's like, should you, is this rule? The question is this rule going to force you to either back out of that show or forfeit WNBF membership? My hope is no. I think if we chat with Bob, I think we can get some clarity on this. But as it reads, it does seem like that would be a conflict with that rule if you were to do that.
Yeah. My turn.
Any further things to add on that? I mean, I think just logistically, I really like some clarity on this rule, and if some addendums need to be made to this rule, because like I said, as it reads, it just doesn't seem to quite make sense logistically for an athlete to put that restriction in place.
I feel like this is the 1-year rule rewritten with different words, right? We're celebrating that we got rid of this time limit that you have to compete within 1 year to maintain that pro status. But now we're putting, okay, we'll get rid of that. But here's a caveat, you have to compete with us first, right? So like just opportunity wise, right? So I can even pull up the schedule right here. We know there's April shows, there's March, April, May shows, right? So if you are on the East Coast, your first pro event as of 2023, because we know they're still working on the 24 schedule, 2023 pro event would be June 3rd on the East Coast or June 10th on the West Coast. Okay, so maybe you have to wait a month to compete again because you have to do this show before you do any other shows. If you miss that, you're looking at August 19th for the East Coast or all the way down to October 14th for the West Coast, right? So really looking at through the schedule, there's about 3 pro opportunities, East Coast versus West Coast, if you're a domestic US athlete, that you can tap into. And anything in between there, if you compete within another federation, per this rule right now, you will lose your pro card, which you just earned, right? So it just doesn't make sense. It seems overly restrictive when we should be, the post was all about celebrating getting rid of restriction, but now we're seeing this almost watered down, diluted version of the same rule. right? You can't, it's telling people you can compete wherever you want, except you can't compete anywhere until you compete with us. So
Yeah.
it's just, I don't like it. And the fact that we have to ask for clarity on the rule tells me that it's not written as well as it should be. It should be very firm, very detailed, very precise, and well thought through for the reasons that we're bringing up, right? Because we're thinking of it as an athlete, right? Like, okay, so I've got to show, you just like tentatively thinking about shows that happen, right? OCB has some shows early September. We know that WNBF has their big East Coast New York show end of September. So if you compete March, April, win one of the WNBF pro cards then, or even like August, you now have to skip all those early September, late August shows, miss 4 or 5 weeks out of your season and just sit and wait until you compete as a pro. It's wasted money. It's wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
And I just don't see the reasoning for it, honestly.
Because you're at the mercy of the schedule. It's not like, you can't dictate time. So it's not like you say, well, I'm gonna compete with the on a WNBA pro stage tomorrow then since I won it. It's like no, you're at the mercy of the calendar. That's how these things run. So and I don't think necessarily competing it elsewhere first necessarily does devalue the, that pro opportunity. So I think there's a blurb in here about valuing their WNBF pro membership. I don't necessarily think competing elsewhere necessarily devalues it. I think the fact that a competitor goes for a WNBF pro card means they value it, they want it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, even outside of the confines of a like competing as a pro in the same season you turn pro, right? Like if you say, okay, I'm going to shut it down here, and then 3 years from now, you're like, okay, I'm setting up my season. I want this to be my WNBF pro debut. Say you have, I'm just throwing dates out here. Say
Mm-hmm.
my WNBF pro debut is going to be in August, mid-August of 2024, right? But you're in an area that you have a local show that's say the first week of August, right? If you have a local OCB show, say,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have a local OCB show, it's right down the street, it's 20 minutes from your house. You're like, wow, this is perfect. I can do this OCB show. Maybe I'll turn pro there, that'd be cool, but like this would be a really nice warm-up show for me to get my feet under me and
Mm-hmm.
I say I haven't competed in 3 years, right? I haven't competed in 3 years. Like let me shake off the cobwebs a little bit, get some stage experience before I make my pro debut. So I think logistically it just as it reads, like I said, just doesn't quite make sense logistically. Um I think I would like to see an addendum to this rule or some clarity on this rule, but like I said, we'll talk with Bob about this and get his what his thought process is on it and what he thinks of just the logistics from an athlete perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it rubs me a little bit that this, and no sign of this was mentioned in the caption of the post, right? Because this post was like, hey, here's our big update. It's almost like this rule was kind of slid in because how many people actually dove into this PDF? And that's why we wanted to cover this, because like the caption in the post reads as like, yay, like all we did was drop 2 rules, not we dropped 2 rules and added in one that's actually vaguely similar to the one that we just dropped, right? So if that's going to happen, I feel like you have to be like, we've modified, we've adjusted, whatever. Like, yes, in the caption it says like, please read the rules, but a lot of athletes unfortunately don't until it's too late or until they're notified like, oh, hey, you broke XYZ rule. There goes your pro card you just worked your ass off for.
Yeah, and that's we talked about it. That's why a big part of why we saw it as our duty to report this, even though this is a criticism on our end. We believe that athletes should be aware of what the rules are, have some clarity on the rules and what they are, and are informed. So obviously, the best way is always to just go to the website and check these things out. But you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's people miss things or like don't read everything, which unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this conversation here and this covering here, I think will hopefully help some people. make some decisions and be informed. And then our follow-up podcast with Bob, look out for that if you are looking to compete with the WNBF, hoping to turn pro, all that fun stuff, because I think this will be highly relevant to you and in how you craft your season and make decisions on when you compete, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think we hammered on that one pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So I think we'll leave the rest of that rule covering up to our into our. We'll let that go until our conversation with Bob, where we can talk with him directly.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
And that will be released too. That's public as well. I don't know if I mentioned that, but next rule. So WNBF pro memberships are good for 1 year. Pros must keep their membership current to retain pro status. Expiration month they won their pro status. Pretty straightforward. Renew your membership every year if you want to stay competing with us. I think putting this rule in place when if you're pulling out the rule that's that you don't have to compete every year, but they do want you to retain your membership. I know some people have other opinions, but I'm actually okay with this rule. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I mean, it shows your support for the federation, right? I know there are some federations that only require you to pay on years you're competing, and that's fine and great, and that's like one, model and system. I don't have any issue with this. It's the same as like if I'm part of a professional affiliation with like for the, American Physical Therapy Association or something, right? Like you just have to pay your yearly dues. That's what you do to stay active and to stay a member. And that's all they're asking here. So I don't think this is out of line with a lot of standards across multiple different industries.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that I think if an athlete is renewing their membership and paying their membership dues, even if they're not competing, I think that in itself shows that they value the pro membership. So just something to think about with looking back at Rule 2. From here, the next rule: athletes accepting professional status from an untested federation concede their WNBF pro status or pro membership for 10 years. We covered this, or you covered this, and we talked about it. You covered it explicitly, I believe, in a prior news segment. I don't know how much time you want to spend on this rule. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I think you've covered it.
It's a rule that they being the WNBF executives seem to be very steadfast on, right? So it's whether you like it or not, it seems like it's here to stay. It's a rule that will probably only affect a small minority. I think most people that were upset, myself included, it's just the premise of it. And that's the argument of what grows natural bodybuilding. Is it, natural bodybuilders only competing in certain natural bodybuilding federations, or natural bodybuilders excelling in the sport in general and bringing more eyes to what natural bodybuilding can be as an athlete? And that's a debate that lots of people disagree on. So we can just leave that open. Now, I will say the presence of that rule gives me a little bit of concern for, and we haven't reached it yet, the statement at the very bottom of the document. So do you want to like skip to that? Because I feel like these two are very closely tied. And that is the drug testing philosophy statement. Only because there seems to be a little bit of ambiguity in the way that certain things were written. One being that the rule above specifically says from an untested federation and does not name a federation, right? You and I both know that they are most likely referring to NPC IFBB. However, they don't state that, which leaves rules to be interpreted, right? So if we read this statement here, the backbone of the WNBF has and always be its drug testing morals and values. And I think we both agree with that. That's why we are drawn to the WNBF, right? Like no one questions that they drug test all their winners. Everyone hits a polygraph. The polygraph is very intensive. It's not something they just skip through. So they uphold a high standard of testing.
Yeah.
Agreed. Organizations that do not drug test at a minimum of 30% to 100%. And again, that statement in itself is very unclear. I'm assuming they mean of total athletes per show. Minimum of, we'll fill in the gap, minimum of 30% to 100% of athletes, and have the ability to provide an athlete with their drug test results is not natural bodybuilding. So if you're saying if a show doesn't meet those two very specific criteria, they're not natural bodybuilding. Does that then, because we didn't name a federation above in the rule, imply that if it's not natural, it's untested? Because then it leaves this ambiguous statement of, can an individual within the WNBF, an executive, say, you competed with so-and-so natural federation, however, they did not test XYZ, therefore you competed in an untested federation, accepted their pro card, therefore you're banned for 10 years. Now, is it a stretch? Maybe. I don't know. And that's the problem with rules when they're written in this ambiguous way, is it leaves that open, like we're having these conversations because I'm unsure, you're unsure, and I would hate to compete in what I feel is a natural federation, but someone else's opinion is different, and because that a person has a different opinion and they're in a place of power, now I'm banned from a federation for 10 years. So it leaves me feeling unsettled.
Yeah, yeah. I would assume that untested means not tested, right? So I would assume that it would apply to organizations that are untested, like not like maybe they don't meet the WNBF standard of testing, but untested, like tested, not no testing at all. But yes, it does leaves the door open a little bit as to how that is how that rule would be applied.
Yeah.
But again, I'd like to get clarity from Bob on this and hear it directly from him.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's my personality, right? A little cynical, a little glass half empty. I look at the worst case scenario of everything. So that's me reading into these rules probably more so than most people would. But I feel like that's our job, right? I want to like worst case scenario, what could happen because of XYZ scenario so that we're prepared for it if it were to happen to an athlete or ourselves, right?
Yep, I agree.
All right.
Yep, should be informed and as to their competing and what it will do and quote unquote consequences. I think it's a more derogatory term that I'm looking for, but what it entailed.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go through the next rule. At all WNBF Pro events, crossovers from Open Pro and Masters Pro only are allowed. Okay, so they're allowing crossovers. It looks like they're allowing crossovers from Open to Masters.
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't in the past.
Right, but not between divisions, right? So they've always and this specifically says pros, right? Not amateurs. So I'm assuming they still allow
Yeah,
crossovers within the amateurs. And this is different than other federations, right? So OCB, just because we're both familiar with them and they're, a larger domestic organization, allows crossovers between debut, novice, open, masters, right? So you can go between the age groups or experience levels if you want, but you could not go between classic physique and bodybuilding within the same show. The WNBF does allow that. Now they don't have classic physique, but you can go between physique and bodybuilding within the same show at the amateur. This rule to me reads as that's not allowed once you're a professional, which I actually like. I want you to pick your class. This is the class that best defines my physique and stick with it. But they are saying you can compete, open and masters as well, just based on your age and availability too.
Yeah. I like, as I think for amateurs, I think it's a good idea to allow them to cross over from different categories. But that's maybe a tangent from here. This is more so opening pros to compete in both open and masters.
Right. And specifying what they do allow, which means that anything else is not allowed, right?
Yep. So okay. From here, polygraph tests for pros are good for 6 weeks by licensed WNBF professionals. All pros awarded cash must provide a urine specimen the day of the event. All WNBF pros to agree to random in and out competitive season urinalysis polygraph testing. Be interesting to have a polygraph out of season, but sure.
Yeah.
If you want a polygraph, I'd rather urine test, but that's just me being funny. I don't. This is pretty similar to how it was previously. I don't know if there's any. Maybe there's some small tweaks, but all seems pretty standard stuff. If you're getting cash, you should get urine tested. I completely agree with that, and
Mhm.
Agreeing to out of season testing.
I think we
Fair.
want more of that, right? I think we both agree with that. The
Yep.
big one for those individuals that are newer to the WNBF is that the WNBF does not acknowledge other organizations' polygraphs. That's why it specifically says WNBF licensed professionals. You cannot get a polygraph from, I'll bring up the OCB again because I know they do it and I know other federations don't. You cannot do an OCB show, get polygraphed, and then use that same polygraph for the WNBF 2 weeks later, even if it's within the 6 week time frame, because they're run slightly differently. So it has to be a WNBF polygraph to be valid for 6 weeks.
Which I think is fair. I don't really see any
No, no,
issue with that.
just they have a potentially a higher standard. I know going through both polygraphs, the WNBF one is much more extensive than other ones I've done. So I think it's a valid reasoning.
I agree. And then
Yeah.
the next rule is for 2024 qualification for WNBF Worlds will be to have competed in at least one WNBF pro event during 2024. Pros living in regions that don't have pro shows offering their categories may enter Worlds. And then those who place in the top three at 2023 Worlds or hold a WNBF Pro overall Worlds title are also eligible for Worlds. So basically, if you're living in the US or Canada, um, uh, countries that have pro events, you have to qualify as a or compete in a pro event before going to Worlds, rather than just putting Worlds as the only show on your schedule, except for
Yeah.
countries, or actually it says regions. So maybe we can get some clarity on how that breakout is, and define which regions are not are exempt from this rule. So I think that would be good to get some clarity. I
Yeah.
did say, let's say regions. I think that's a good idea. Say you live in, I don't know, like Singapore, and you don't have any pro events except if you have to want to fly to the United States. It's like, are you going to require somebody to fly to the United States and fly back and then fly back for Worlds? Yeah, I think that's a good exemption in my opinion.
Mhm.
As you push to get more, expand more, I think then you modify. But I think the only thing that I would like clarity on is just what those regions are, and
Mhm.
for people listening that it might apply to, that they wouldn't have to qualify. I think it's probably could be implied or inferred, rather. Inferred is the word I'm
Mhm.
looking for. But yeah, that anything else
But
you
it,
would?
it shouldn't have to be. That's the thing, right? Like, and I've harped on it a couple of times, it shouldn't
Yeah,
be implied or ambiguous, right? If we're gonna say regions somewhere on the website, and maybe in the 2024 website, they will show this, right? We don't
yeah,
know that yet because it's not live. I would love to see, here's our list of affiliates, and here they are broken down by regions, right? Like North America, Eurasia, Oceania, right? Like break down the regions, list the countries within that region, and then you can look as an athlete, all right, here's the pro show that I have to do to qualify for Worlds, or hey, there isn't a pro show that's available within these 3, 4 countries that are in my region. That means I just have to keep my pro membership and I can go to Worlds, right? And obviously you could reach out to the executives, but that's gonna, if you have thousands of athletes asking these questions, it's gonna bog you down, right? So the more precise and more clear you can be with rules and the website and all these things, it just makes the administrative side of things so much easier.
I agree.
Yeah. But other than that, yeah, I think that's the only thing, especially since regions is capitalized and underlined, right? It's indicating something very specific, which we don't know what that specific is. But I'm again hoping that maybe that is in the website that we just don't see yet.
Yep. And then the last one, it doesn't. I don't think this is really a rule. It's just more of a statement. WNBF pros are encouraged to be ambassadors for natural bodybuilding by assisting at INBF amateur events, attending judging clinics, and participating in training posing seminars, etc. Please contact an INBF promoter in your area to become more involved. Additionally, it is a privilege to be part of the WNBF. Everyone who is part of the federation must refrain from conduct detrimental to the integrity of and public confidence in the WNBF. Conduct by anyone in the WNBF that is illegal, violent, dangerous, or irresponsible damages the reputation of others in the sport and undercuts public respect and support for the WNBF. We should endeavor at all times, including and especially within social media, to be people of high character. We must show respect for others. We must strive to conduct ourselves in ways that favorably reflect on ourselves, natural bodybuilding, and the WNBF. Our leadership, our INBF and WNBF promoters, and international affiliates work hard to provide opportunities for athletes, and we appreciate your dedication to the WNBF to make our events successful over all others. So, I mean, overall, that's, I think it's great to encourage people to get involved in, in INBF shows and, network and connect with the community. I think that's great for everyone, for young athletes, for, it's a two-way street, right? So, we've been involved with the WNBF Ontario. That was incredible to have that opportunity to see people that you don't always get to see, from social media, otherwise people you talk with and meet new people. And I value those experiences. So I think that's great. And I think, behaving in a responsible manner, respectful manner, I think is good. But I mean, I think there's probably a little bit of a door open for some enforcement on people, but I mean, that's their right. If somebody's doing something, especially if it's something illegal, that's it's fair play, I think, at that point. But yeah, that's about all I got on that one.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a code of conduct. It's a very open to interpretation code of conduct of who says what is favorable and reflects highly of ourselves and what's moral and what's not. And I don't love that because I know that many people have many different interpretations of what's acceptable in today's day and age. So obviously you don't want to be like slandering the sport or, completely just, illegal things. Obviously that makes sense. And they have to make some sort of statement like this. So I understand it. I just, how I am. I don't like people telling me what I can and can't do. So that's just my personality, but I understand it because I'm, not me officially, but a WNBF pro is wearing the WNBF name in their bio, in their gear, and what they present themselves as. So they will be affiliated with that regardless of if they want to or not because of those titles.
Yeah, and I think in general, I think it's fair for somebody, an organization, to want representatives of their organization, even if they're not paid representatives, but they do essentially become representatives. Or I guess some of them do get paid, but to be, good ambassadors for the organization. So, yep, I mean, you could get into situations where there get some, unfair assessment of you, that somebody just doesn't like you, but I prefer to probably assess that individually rather than just blanket this rule. So I think if the spirit of the rule is applied properly, then I have no issue with it.
Yeah.
Not rule, but just
philosophy, guidance, code of conduct, however you want to interpret it. Yeah.
Cool. And that's the last one, since we already went through the bottom note. Overall, there's some very good stuff, some stuff that needs some clarity, I think, and could use some either addendums or looking at, but or an additional look at. But as we said, we'll be able to discuss directly from Bob or directly with Bob, and we will publish that hopefully in the next, I don't know, whenever this goes live, within the next, let's just say within the next month or so. So depending on when we get things scheduled and our schedule for rolling podcast episodes out. But that is in the works to get him on the calendar. So any closing remarks from you, James, before we close out this news segment? Thanks for letting me jump in on this news segment. I don't know if I'm going to be on the little thumbnail this time. Goofy, I'm
Yeah,
sure
you might be. You might be. We fired James. He no, it's I don't want this to come off as a criticism of any one organization. I think we cover the news as it comes, right? So regardless of the federation, if things like this are aired, it is our duty and our responsibility to cover them, right? So for any individuals within the WNBF, the executives, the athletes themselves, this is not coming after anything. This is us doing our due diligence to educate our viewers, i.e. the athletes, which these rules will impact, and to express our concerns as athletes and as individuals with a platform to somewhat speak for the athletes. Here's how I as an athlete read this. Here's how you as an athlete read this. Whether or not that was your intention, that's how it's being interpreted, and bringing that to your attention so that we can address these concerns together productively. Right. And that's the biggest point to get across, because there's been times where, whether my tone, our tone, way things were interpreted, it felt like we were coming after someone or an individual or an organization or a rule, and that's never been the intention, right? Our platform has always been for the athlete, by the athlete, right? And that's exactly what this post is about. Like, I, as an athlete, want clarity on rule number 2, meaning if I win my pro card in XYZ show and I go compete in another federation, am I going to lose that pro card? Because logistically I couldn't make it across the country to the next pro show to, cement my pro status, or I just had to shut the season down and it just didn't happen where the WNBF Pro event came into that schedule timely, right? So there's definitely room for improvement on some of these statements. Whether or not they were written in this intentional way or not, we will find out. And I just want to leave it like that. And I want to leave it open to a discussion by our viewers and our readers, and the YouTube comments and the Instagram comments on the thumbnail. This is your chance to let individuals know what you think. We are obviously very vocal about what we think. That's the whole purpose of these videos. But this is our platform for you to have a voice too, right? So we know that individuals, higher executives within the sport, read the comments, watch the videos. So if you have a question, you have a concern, you have an opinion, use our platform to voice it through us, right? So comment, like, subscribe, share, so all the athletes know about these rules, the potential changes, and how it may impact them. And we'll see you guys at the next one.